and they're just checked out in a different way, or they're so overworked, they're so burnt out, they're just going day to day and doing whatever that they can, to just survive and get them food on the table and then repeat the next day. And I think your story really shows and proves that like it doesn't have to be that way. No matter how bad you think it is, or how burnt out you think you are, or how addicted you are to medication, or have all these health issues going on, there's always a way out. Welcome to the Bomb Life Podcast, where fitness, mindset, and real talk collide. This isn't just about workouts. It's about transforming your body, mind, and life. Get ready for unfiltered conversations, expert advice, and the motivation you need to level up in every way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Bomb Life Podcast. I am Melissa Vogel, your host. Oh my God, it still just is so crazy to say the new name of this podcast. I'm so excited. Welcome to the Bomb Life Podcast. Like I said, the other week, it's just been a really tough and fun decision to make at the same time. And I always tell people, if you are nervous about a decision, yet super excited about it, you know it's the right decision. So if you're on the fence about something and you're like, oh my God, I'm so scared, I'm so nervous, yet I'm excited in the possibilities and all of that, you're on the right path. Trust yourself, you're on the right path. And that's where I fell with this podcast name change and the shifts that we're making. It makes me so nervous and yet feels so good at the same time. Now, with these podcast shifts and adjustments, it impacts today's episode. We have Jen St. Clair on. Now, before I dive into Jen's story and why she is on with us, we had her husband on, Mr. Jared, and his episode was number 255, Vitality Unleashed, Health Insights with Jared St. Clair. Now, Jared is incredible himself, and he is the host of the podcast Vitality Radio. Him and Jen own the Vitality Nutrition store in Utah. He's got an amazing story and journey and everything that he's been doing with supplements. And when we got done recording, he was like, you need to have my wife on. She's got an incredible journey and story to tell and everything that she's overcome. And I'm like, done, sold. And Jared and I have been working together on his health and fitness journey, and I will be back on his podcast to kind of go along, give updates, what he's learning, what he's struggling with on his show. So make sure you guys are tuning in to his podcast, Vitality Radio Podcast, and listen, because he is now one of my clients, and I love that he's being so open and honest and vulnerable about his journey and what he's struggling with and how he wants to live his best life ever too. So tune into that. But we get a special treat because once a month, we're going to have Jared on this podcast, and we are going to dive into supplement questions, creatine. What questions do you have around vitamin D, new formulas he's finding, digestive enzymes, probiotic, like everything. We are going to have this expert guru at our fingertips, and I'm so excited about it. And so we're going to do a little segment once a month. I'm hoping it'll be the first episode of every month, so it's easy for you guys to remember. And then I would just get into a habit of it. And I love pattern and routines and habit. And we'll have him on and answer all your questions. So you guys have homework. Email me at it's melissavogel@gmail.com. What questions do you have about supplements? What do you want us to dive into? I know I'll get a little flooded. If you're on Instagram too, feel free to send me a DM over there. I'm happy. I know more people are on there and it's just easier. Do it. Send it over. Have you always wondered about creatine? Have you always wondered about vitamin D? Have you want to know more about digestive enzymes? Do you want to share with me what you're on and have Jared tell you if it's good, bad, ugly, brilliant, like whatever, anything? Send it into us because we're going to do this little segment and get to just keep learning more. And if we're lucky, he'll keep updating you on his journey too throughout that. But again, tune into his podcast and listen to us going on together and get all the updates on his stuff too. With that being said, make sure you check out the show notes as well, because we have links in there for you to visit vitalitynutrition.com. We have a discount code with them. So if there is anything that you guys end up getting, use the code BOMB, MOM, and SAVE with all of our links in there. So with that being said, I got to talk with Jared's wife today. Jared has a beautiful wife, Jen St. Clair, and she has a remarkable story of resilience and transformation. She was put on antidepressants at just 13 years old, and she spent decades battling mental health challenges, bipolar disorder, addiction, chronic pain, symptoms of autoimmune disease. I mean, you name it. We will put a disclaimer in this episode, probably somewhere in the title, and I'm going to give you a disclaimer right now because we do talk about suicide. So if this is something that you don't want to talk in or hear, if this is something that you don't want the children to hear and you're listening in the car with other people or whatever, just wait till later. So just so you know, we do dive into that, and I like to give you a little disclaimer about that. And then also, Jen talks about her challenges and getting off her SSRIs and antidepressants and her medication. Again, disclaimer, we are not encouraging or recommending anyone do that without the proper supervision and care of their physician. So whenever you are starting any type of dietary nutritional supplement and changing medication, please always seek out your physician and let them know. And back to Jen. After she had some struggles, she found strength in recovery and dedicated herself to helping others. And she also became a facilitator for addiction in a recovery program. And at 44, feeling broken, stuck, Jen met her best friend and future hubby, Jared, and he introduced her to natural medicine and holistic healing. Within 2 years, she was free from psychotropic medications, experiencing emotional balance and dramatically improving mental health and physical health. And now, happily married and a proud grandma of 5, Jen co-owns Vitality Nutrition with Jared, where they inspire, hope, and educate others about the power of supplementation, nutrition, and emotional vitality. They are this power couple now, and I love that her story is helping and reaching other people. And that's why I wanted to have her on today, because we need to hear all the stories, all the journeys of hope, and letting you guys know that no matter where you're at, no matter what your situation is, even if you are living a completely life than Jen did, and you can't relate to like her specific journey, you can relate to the struggle. You can relate to feeling stuck and hopeless and thinking maybe, medication is just what I need for the rest of my life. And I love sharing stories that, you know what? Anything is possible. You can overcome anything. And we talk about the identity shift that needs to happen too, and how Jen identified as someone with bipolar. Like, that's just who I am. This is just what I have and what I deal with. And there's no other way. And that's not true. So, sometimes I come across clients, friends, family, and I just want to look at them and say, how long have you identified as someone being depressed or sick or overweight? When are you going to give up that narrative? When are you going to rewrite that script? But you can't always deliver a message that way to some people. And Jen and I talked about that, and I asked her, I'm like, well, you probably identified as, continue fill in the blank with the story that she shares. And she's like, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, does this mean that Jen's road is perfect? No. No one's road is perfect. You are going to have setbacks. You are going to learn. You are going to grow. Things are embedded and ingrained in us from how we were raised, what we believe, the medications, our gut and mind health. We talk about the connections with that in this episode. And know that it's going to be bumpy. There are going to be challenges, but you can overcome all of them, and you can turn those challenges into tools for growth. That's the message of this episode. So I'm excited about it. As always, you guys, please rate and review this podcast. Share it, blast it. 5 stars if you feel appropriate. Please leave us a review, and always go to the show notes, click the link. And if you're looking to get started and you need the coaching, book a call. Get on that phone with me. Let's chat. Let's see what's a fit for you. Let's see where you're struggling with and what options we have to help you move forward. All right, everyone, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Bomb Life podcast. Today we have Jen St. Clair on the show. Welcome to the show, Jen. I almost called you Jared.
Thank you. That's all right.
Okay, funny story, because I got to do the proper introduction. for Miss Jen here. I look down at the screen because we can see each other and it says Jared. And so I'm like, welcome to the show. And I look down, I'm like, Jen.
I forgot to change it.
Oh, no, it's all good. So we know Jen from her husband, Jared. He was on the podcast not that long ago. God, maybe when this airs, if you search back 7 episodes or so, you'll probably find him. I can't think of the number offhand, what episode number it is, but Jared was on and he is the host of the Vitality Health. Did I say it right? Vitality Health.
Vitality Radio, Vitality Nutrition. Now I can't
See,
talk.
I know you're getting it too. Vitality Nutrition Radio.
Yeah, podcast.
Podcast. Yep. Got it. Now no one will forget it. Vitality Nutrition Radio Podcast. He is the host of that. He's been on before telling his story and his journey and talking about supplements and everything. It was such a great episode. And then when we ended, he was like, you got to talk to my wife. She's got a great story to share as well. And I'm like, yes, please. So that is how we know Jen from Jared, not to get confused, Jen with Jared.
Jays.
Yeah, all the J's. Now, Jen, you do have quite the story and quite the journey, and your life churned even more after meeting Jared and being introduced to more, what do we want to call it? Holistic?
Holistic would be a good word.
Yeah, way of life, because you're diagnosed bipolar, you've had suicide attempts. I mean, girl, you have lived a crazy, crazy life. Now, did I read it correctly that at just the age of 13, you were prescribed antidepressants?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, Prozac was fairly new on the market, and I was put on Prozac at 13.
Oh my God. Okay. So I have to ask, how do you think early medication shaped your mental health journey?
Well, I think I was convinced pretty early on that that was the only solution, that I would have to be on meds my whole life. And I bought into that pretty fully for a long time, for 30 plus years.
Right. Well, and I just wonder, being that young and being prescribed something like that, how much of that did it affect your identity of like, nope, I have issues. I'm on medication. This is who I am. This is how I identify as, and probably I'm a lost case. This is just the way I am at 13.
Yeah, 100%. That was exactly where I was at when I met Jared. It had definitely become an identity for me. My oldest son had also been diagnosed bipolar they told me at age 5 he was going to be bipolar. They couldn't diagnose him at that age because he was too young, they told me that that's what we were looking at, that and ADHD. And so that just reaffirmed everything too in my head that, well, this is just how it is in my family. This is who we are. And there's not anything we can do about it because it just gets passed along.
Wow. Okay. So back at 13 years old, I have to start there because, we have a lot of parents that listen to the episode too. And I'm sure we even have parents that are listening going, I put my kid on it, or people listening that are going, I was considering doing that. They told me that's the only way. But we take our kids to the doctor, right? We listen to what they say and we believe everything that they tell us. So
yes. And my mother was a nurse too. And so she was very indoctrinated into the Western medicine, and you do what the doctors tell you.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was just, and I don't have any, I don't think less of my mother for doing the things she did, the way she did it. She was doing what she believed. And I get it. I was very emotional. I was very depressed. I had an eating disorder. There was a lot going on, and my older 2 siblings had not dealt with those things. And so she was at a loss. Mm-hmm. For sure, knowing what to do with me.
Well, that was my question. Do you remember what was going on then that they wanted to put you on medication? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, I dealt with a lot of depression. I actually started self-harming around 12, 13, cutting. Then the eating disorder, my anorexia kicked in, lost, I just wouldn't eat, and it's a weird thing. I don't necessarily remember it being terrified of gaining weight. It almost was more, in my opinion, the eating disorder was almost more of another form of self-harm. I think I looked at it more in that sense that it was necessarily a weight thing exactly. But yeah, those were kind of the big 3 things going on. Just lots of depression, a lot of crying. That's all I really remember about my junior high school years, is just being sad all the time. And so,
Which
and
is
then,
like
yeah,
it's like every teenager right now. Like,
right. Yeah.
I'm
Some of it,
sure.
I'm sure, with hormones.
Yeah. Like if we were playing this right now for a room full of eighth, ninth, and 10th graders, maybe even younger or older, they probably would be listening to it going, that's me right now. Like I feel like that's every teenager. And probably from when we were younger to now, it's even worse.
Right. Well, and I've raised 4 kids and I've seen every one of them in that phase exactly the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so from there, as a teenager, getting medicated early, what happened next? Like, how did your life start changing and evolving and going down the wrong path from that point on?
So it's interesting. I graduated from high school when I was 17 and I couldn't wait to move out. So I moved out of my parents' house pretty quickly after I graduated.
Okay.
And at that point, I guess you would say I fell in with the wrong crowd at that point, got into using different drugs and things like that for a few years. And during that time, I actually went off medication. And it's
Like, just quit? Like, was
yeah,
like,
I just wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't going at that point. I didn't care, right? I was self medicating in other ways. Wasn't going to doctors for
yeah.
anything, and so that went on for about 4 or 5 years. I ended up getting pregnant with my oldest son, and that was kind of my wake up call to that I needed to pull my life back
Right.
together a little more than what it had been, and so I had him and I kept him. I didn't marry his dad and ended up being a single mom at 22. And then that's when things started really falling apart again. And I ended up back on medication because I was just the stress of being a single mom and all of the things that go along with that. And then he was a difficult child. He had his own behavior issues from a very young age. And so that's when I ended up back on medication and pretty much stayed on medication from there until I was about 45.
And then did you develop addiction to other drugs
I
and
did. So, yes, in the
issues?
process of all that, I do have some chronic pain. I have some disc issues in my neck that were causing, I would have these knots in my left shoulder that were just, I couldn't use my arms sometimes. They never went away for years. And I would go to doctors and they didn't know what was going on. I had multiple, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and irritable bowel when I was in my 20s. And then as I had kids and got older, they were constantly checking me things for like lupus and rheumatoid and nothing, like I had lots of symptoms, but nothing was ever quite panning out. But my pain was just out of control. And at that point, I was prescribed opiates. And I will never forget the conversation on that the first time I went in, or the one time I went in, and the doctor specifically said, there's this great new drug that works on the opiate receptors, but it's not addictive. And that was OxyContin.
Oh, God.
And so I then spent, the addiction was there from the beginning, but it didn't get bad for a few years. My brother-in-law at the time died by suicide, and my ex-husband and I were the ones that found him. And that kind of tipped me over the edge to where I don't want to say I was self-medicating just for that, because there was absolutely pain, but it became
and trauma.
The trauma definitely kicked it into overdrive, where I became very addicted for about 8 years. I would do at that point, I was off of Oxy, but I was doing Lortabs, and I could take 8 to 10 Lortab 10s at a time, just a handful, and pop them. And I'd go to bed sometimes and I'd feel my breathing getting shallow. And I'd think, oh, I did it this time too much. And I'd wake up the next morning and I would repeat the process.
Wow. And how old were you during this time? And
it was during my 30s.
Okay.
So I will be clean from the opiates 15 years this August. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And while you were navigating all of this, you were trying to raise kids.
Yeah. It's hard because my two youngest, the first 5 to 8 years of their lives, I was pretty checked out. That's one part of it that I feel really bad about, that I wasn't probably the best mom. And then my boys are a few years older than them. They got, especially my oldest son, he got to see a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so, it wasn't the best times.
Yeah. But now that you are where you're at now, you get to be the most present incredible mom, grandma, that you possibly can be.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because I know there's a lot of women listening too that can say, you know what? I was so checked out the first 5, 8, 10 years of my kid's life. And there are probably people listening right now going, girl, that's still me. I
Yeah.
still feel so, and they're just checked out in a different way, not because they're taking any
Right.
type of
It's
drugs
easy.
or anything.
Like phones can be a big checkout, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're just checked out in a different way, or they're so overworked, they're so burnt out, they're just going day to day and doing whatever that they can, to just survive and get them food on the table and then repeat the next day. And I think your story really shows and proves that like it doesn't have to be that way, no matter how bad you think it is, or how burnt out you think you are, or how addicted you are to medication, or have all these health issues going on. There's always a way out. There's always
Yes.
a way to make a change, and you're a living proof of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell people I regret certain aspects of hurting people and things like that, but
Sure.
I wouldn't change anything at this point that I've been through, because where it's gotten me, what I've
Yeah.
learned in that process, and who I am now, I'm very grateful for everything I went through that has got me to this point. And so instead of looking back and regretting a lot and being upset that my kids missed out on a mom during those years, I'm like, okay, but now my kids are adults and they see what I did
Yes.
at that time. And that's just as important, and maybe more important in some ways, than if I had been the fully attentive mom when they were,
Oh, for sure.
5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere in
Yeah,
there. So
for sure. I had to bring this up. You had said that you were was it lupus that you said? Diagnosed with lupus?
that I wasn't diagnosed with it, but they
Fibromyalgia.
tested quite often. Oh, yes, fibromyalgia. Yes.
I know those two always they can go hand in hand and stuff. That and just all these other issues. And I have got to wonder, how much did being on medication at such an early age affect your gut health? Because
Oh,
we know so much about the brain and gut connection now.
right. Well, if you want to address that, you've got to go back even farther. I was that kid I slept through the night from the time my mom brought me home till I was 6 months old. And at 6 months old, I started having chronic ear infections. I lived on antibiotics the first, I don't know how many years. And well,
Really?
I got tubes at age 5. And so, in fact, I developed a pretty severe allergy to penicillin because I had taken so much penicillin over the years. And so, yeah, if you want to go way back, my gut has been messed up for a really long time.
Since infancy. And then,
Yeah.
shocker, you have a lot of mental health issues and challenges once you became a teenager. And I think people overlook that big time
Oh, 100%.
of that mind gut connection.
I'm convinced that there's a few things. Gut health is the number one contributing factor to mental health issues. I believe that with everything I have at this point in time, from everything I've learned and studied up to this point now. There's lots of things that contribute to that besides antibiotics, what we eat.
Sure.
But I also think that's the key to fixing a lot of this is
Wow. Okay. So looking back now, what was a pivotal moment where you realized you had the power to really change your story? Can you think of a moment where you're like, holy shit, like I actually could do something? Was it later in life? Did you have any moments earlier?
And it was definitely later in life. Like I said, I was fairly checked out on the opiates for quite a few years, and in a not great marriage that contributed to wanting to check out. That all actually came to a head, and the suicide attempts came in the middle of that period. My ex-husband, who was my husband at the time, had an affair, and I found out about it, and I just was not even able to cope at that point because
How many kids did you have then?
well, we had 5. One was his. We had 4 between us.
Okay.
We had 5 kids though, and we'd been married for like 12 years, 11, 12 years. And I just fell apart basically. And I really think the biggest part was I just was on the opiates and I had numbed myself to everything. And all of a sudden there was this flood of emotion that I had no idea what to do with. And so I actually overdosed on on Xanax and up at my parents' house, and they took me to the hospital. I convinced them at that point that it had been an accident, so they let me go home. But about 6 weeks later, I tried again, and my ex at and some friends of ours found me at the time, took me to a local hospital, and I spent a week in the psych ward and then detoxing off of the opiates at that point. At that point, we decided we would try to work things out. And that's kind of when I really buckled down. I was like, okay, I've got to make some serious changes to make this work. And everyone had recognized I had a problem, but nobody wanted to say anything because they knew I had pain. So they didn't want to doubt me, but they also, no one wanted to confront me on how bad. And I mean, I was stealing pills from whoever I could find to steal pills from.
It was bad.
It was bad. I would, I would get a bottle of 90 count Lortab that if they lasted me 2 weeks, that was a pretty good 2 weeks. And then I was scrambling to find more because I was out. So at that point, once I was off of them, I needed to focus. And it's interesting. It's funny because I actually went into fitness. I started working out, and that helped a lot in the moment with some mindset stuff. And I loved it so much. I actually ended up becoming a personal trainer and getting certified. And I wish I had known then what I know now with all the other like supplement stuff and diet stuff that I knew. But even just that was enough. The power of just exercising and moving your body. I'm a big outdoor person. I love to hike. I got way back into hiking. And that actually helped me realize overcoming, when I left rehab, they told my family in the big meeting we had right before I left that there was a 90% chance I would be back there within 6 weeks.
90%?
90%.
Good God.
Yeah. I mean, and what does that tell you when you're leaving the place? It's almost like, what's the point in trying?
Right. Like we slapped a Band-Aid on you, and just so you know, this is not going to be sticky anymore and it's going to fall off and you're going to have to be right back. Well,
and I opted to. I didn't want to. There's things they can put you on to help wean you off of the opiates and that. And I didn't want to do that. I did the whole cold turkey thing. And I did have to use like some blood pressure meds and a few things because like getting off of opiates is brutal. But I also kind of wanted to go through that because I knew I needed to experience that. And I had the shakes for 6 weeks and major gut issues and all the things. It was miserable.
Oh, I bet.
But during that time and then getting my personal training certification, I realized that I really could do hard things. Like I beat the odds. I wasn't back in there in 6 weeks. I've never been back in there, and it's now going on 15 years. So in the back of my mind, I think that was like the first time that I maybe had a little bit of self-confidence. Like I actually did something. I joined an addiction recovery group and I ended up becoming a facilitator for that. And I loved it. It was it's my favorite.
You could relate.
Yeah. It's my favorite
better facilitator
is sitting in there in a room of addicts and, talking it out. And that was empowering to be able to know that my story was inspiring other people and encouraging them to stay clean. And so I think that was around age 38, I think 38, 40, somewhere right in there. And, I got my life, I thought, pulled so together. It was, I was doing all these things. And then my ex came along 5 years later and was like, I still don't want to do this. And so but at that point, I'm like, you know what? I don't think I do either. This isn't working for me either. And I was in a place though, where I could see a lot clearer of just how not good things were.
Right. Well, and how capable you truly were.
I knew being a single mom of 4 kids was not going to be easy. I had mostly not worked. I had done daycare out of our home, and I was doing personal training on the side.
Right.
I really hadn't done like the full-time work thing for a long time. And, I was thrown back into that. And it definitely was difficult, challenging. But I also knew that if I could get over the addiction, that I could handle whatever else came at me.
You could do anything. And I love that it was fitness that helped you have like that turning point and everything. And I think that's really cool because I don't think people see the power in learning how to become strong. And then you took it a step further to help other people learn how to be strong.
I loved it. That lifting heavy weights was like the coolest thing to me in the whole world. So I still love that. And I'm back to training again and I love it.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Right app. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself wondering about the health of your relationships? Whether it's your partner, family, or even coworkers, relationships can be tough to navigate. And that's why I'm so excited to tell you about Right, the relationship interaction tracking experience. Right is an amazing new app that helps you track and assess your interactions with the people who matter most to you. It's like a fitness tracker for your relationships. With Right, you can log your daily interactions, see how they make you feel, and get insights over time to help you understand patterns and make positive changes. Here's what I love most. Right isn't just for romantic relationships. You can track family, friends, and even professional connections. And if you're working with a therapist or coach, Right lets you share your data securely so they can give you even better advice tailored to your needs. Oh, and did I mention it's super easy to use? Plus, you can start for free, track up to 3 relationships, and try out premium features like graphs and charts for the first 30 days, no strings attached. So if you are ready to invest in the health of your relationships and see who's truly right for you, head to your app store now and download the Right app. Your relationships deserve it. I have to ask, when you're going through all of this and you're trying to rediscover yourself and now you're starting over as a single mom, were there points where you found yourself going backwards again? Or did you stay on the path of moving forward and just positivity the whole time?
No, absolutely moving backwards to a large degree. I had a brief relationship right after I got divorced that kind of crushed me again.
We all do.
Right?
I think there is something to getting into that relationship right after your divorce that you're like,
Yes.
oh, wow, that was totally a lesson to learn.
Yeah. Yes. And that's absolutely how I look at it now. But in the moment, it certainly did not feel that way. And the lesson I thought I was learning from it was not the lesson that I feel I've learned now. It was
Mhm.
not nearly as positive.
Mhm.
But my mental health was definitely backsliding. The stress of working, I was working 60-hour weeks.
Yeah.
2 of my kids still lived with me full time. Yeah, dealing with my ex was not fun. There was a lot of conflict there for a while. And so, yeah, and my mental health was definitely backsliding for sure. And so and then in the middle of all that is like, I was diagnosed with, well, it's been probably 10 years now. I was diagnosed with the bipolar diagnosis.
And were you
And
on medication, back on medication for that at that point?
so I'd been on SSRIs for pretty much, well, like I said, once I had my son at 22, I pretty much had been on
So
SSRIs.
that one never went away.
That one never went away.
Wow.
And I ran the gamut. There's not really an SSRI that I haven't been on. I
Really?
did end up on Lexapro, and that's the one that I was on Lexapro for about 15 years. That's the last one that I was on, but yeah, it was about 15 years, 2 of my pregnancies. But at that point, they diagnosed me bipolar and they added the mood stabilizer to it. And so then I was put on Lamictal along with the Lexapro. And that's what I had been on. That's what I was on when I met Jared.
Mhm. And now meeting your husband, that was clearly a huge turning point for you. I got to ask, like, how did this perspective on your health and like and healing, challenge or change what you believe was like possible for you?
So it's interesting. The very first night we talked on the phone for like 3-4 hours. And
Did
I
you guys
wasn't,
meet through a dating app?
we did.
Yeah, I know
And
it.
I was so not, I didn't want to do it, but my kids were like, just try it. And
Yeah.
I made it a week on the dating app and I only responded to one person. And that happened to be Jared.
Oh my God. Oh, I love that.
There you go. And it's funny. We talked and we just hit it off and became best friends like immediately. But that first night, I'm telling him I'm basically warning him, stay away. Like I dumped it all on him.
Oh
Addiction,
God.
suicide.
You were a huge red flag.
Yeah. I'm like, just you don't want to
showed up with
mess
just
with
red
this.
flags.
Exactly. We laugh about it now, but that's 100% what I was doing was like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, you just don't even want to get
Mhm.
involved here. Yeah, he to a large degree was like, yeah, I really don't want to get involved. But we also both recognized, like I said, we became instant best friends. And he just challenged me though right off. And he's like, you're not bipolar. And I was like, bullshit.
Did you know me?
I'm like, I have a diagnosis. I'm on medication. Yeah. You don't know me. Don't tell me that I'm not. And, his point was like we talked about earlier, I had absolutely embraced that. I am
Yeah.
bipolar, right? That was my identity.
Mhm.
And his point to it was, and he's eventually said, you have symptoms that they classify as bipolar, and you have these things going on, but you are not bipolar. And I had to really think about that, for a while. And yeah, it didn't sit well with me for a while because I had been quite the advocate, for medication and all of that.
Right.
That was just what I had always been told my whole life.
Right.
And he's like, if you ever decide you want to try to get off of your meds, let me know and I will help you. And I'm like, you don't want to see that. Like, that's not a good place for me. But as we knew each other longer and longer, every once in a while, he would just challenge that. And he'd be like, I was still all over the place, my mood swings. And I'd hit these manic points and I'd go off on these ridiculous, crazy hikes by myself where I probably shouldn't have been. And then I would get super depressed. I'd have these really bad lows. I'm still all over the place. Just, I guess, in my head, I thought it wasn't quite as bad as it had been before. But he's like, this medication? I don't think medication's doing what you think it's doing. But on the other end of it, too, in some ways, like I had these highs and lows, but I also was really numbed out. Like it was hard to feel real emotion. It was either an extreme of like this manic or it was an extreme of this depression. But there was no middle ground. It was really hard to have much emotion in any other area.
Yeah.
I started listening to his podcast and I actually ended up working for him about a year after I met him.
Were you guys in a relationship then or?
Not really.
We
kind of we dated, but like the best friend thing was really the best fit for us at that time. And so like we were together all the time, but we wouldn't call ourselves a couple or anything like that. We just were best friends.
Okay.
And so after listening to his podcast, and I'm pretty sure he did a few podcasts specifically for me to hear, on SSRI specifically, and just that placebos actually outperform them more often than not. And and then basically he was ahead of the time on that the chemical imbalance theory was a theory that has pretty much been disproven at this point. They've actually come out and admitted that now. But back, 7 years ago, that was still pretty under the radar information.
Right. Yeah.
And then, I started learning a lot. One of Jared's specialties is is gut health and probiotics. And so he was helping me. One of the first thing that ever happened, the first in-person date we ever went on, we went to eat. And I basically didn't eat at that point in time because my stomach would get so sick. And I took like 2 bites and he just flat out, he's like, what's wrong? Why are you not eating? And I just told him, I said, because I'll be running to the bathroom 2 bites in. And he's like, I can help you with that. And I'm like, okay. And he took me back to the store after that and gave me a bottle of actually one of his formulas, Back on Track. This is his favorite story. And he said, this is what made me fall in love with him. But I took that home and the next day took it, which is probiotics and digestive enzymes.
Yeah.
I took it home and took it the next day and he still remembers the text. I texted him and I'm like, this is the first time I've eaten in years that I haven't hurt or my stomach, that I'm not sick to my stomach. And so the first thing he ever gave me, I saw like dramatic results. Right? And so I started thinking maybe there's something to, maybe he knows something, maybe I really could. And the more I listened to different things and worked in the store, the more I started, maybe there are other answers. Maybe I can get off of these meds.
So that was like the real door opener for you of like, maybe I have been missing out on something else. And another key that could unlock the door to my mental health and gut health.
Yeah. And as I learned about gut health, it just made sense to me for whatever, it just seems so logical that would play a part in things.
Right. Okay. So I'm sure we have a lot of people listening now and they're going, okay, I'm on an antidepressant. I'm on an SSRI. Okay. So what happened, Jen? Like, what did you do? And you're off your medication now? Like, how is this even possible?
Yeah. So I've been off my meds for, I wish I had kept a little, it's been at least 4 years now.
Okay.
We might be closer to 5. So I don't recommend doing it quite the way I did it. I was very stubborn about the meds. And as I started to consider that maybe I wanted to try to go off of them, I didn't want to really admit that. I didn't want to admit that Jared might be right. So I actually started.
And it's all you've known since 13.
Right. And then my other thought was, okay, if I do and I fail at this, then I just didn't want like anyone to know, I guess.
Right. Well, now and you're talking with this guy and like you're working there at the store. Like
Right.
there was a lot at stake if it
Yes.
didn't go well,
Right.
you know?
But my curiosity was getting the better of me. Now, I will say this, I am very much, and it's one of the reasons that I probably am where I'm at now with the holistic end. I dive into things. When I was diagnosed bipolar, I dove into like what that meant, what all the things were.
Mm,
Every medication I got, I knew all the side effects. You just like, there's this weird cognitive dissonance that you just like, okay, yeah, but that won't happen to me,
not
right?
me. Yeah.
Or if or it's just the minor ones that happen to you,
Right.
things like that. And so I knew my meds really well. I absolutely knew that I couldn't just stop taking my meds.
No, no,
I'd
no.
had times where I'd ran out and had missed a day or two, and it was awful. And so I knew I had to wean myself off very slowly. I also knew that my doctor wouldn't support me on it at all. So I actually decided to start doing it myself without telling anyone. And I took it very slowly.
Yeah. Disclaimer, do not
Yeah,
do what Jen
that's
did.
my disclaimer. Don't do it.
Always share with your physician when changing medications.
Yeah,
before
I
you move
will
forward.
say I was probably about 4 months in. Like I said, I took it really slow.
Mhm.
And about 4 months in, I did finally, I'm like, I need to tell Jared, because if something goes off the rails, somebody needs to know what's
Right.
going on. And so I told him, and of course he was a little annoyed that I hadn't told him in the beginning, but he was also super happy that I was willing to do it. And his big thing was, okay, let me support you supplementally while you do this. There's things that we can do to help try and balance you out while you
Yeah.
this. And I took almost a year to wean off of both meds. And there were a few times where I had to back it up a little bit and then move forward, cutting it a little more. But I cut it back very slowly, and it took me pretty close to a year to wean off of the two of them.
What was the biggest challenges can you remember that you faced when transitioning off of, psychotropics and medication and then embracing truly a whole natural
Um,
approach?
the interesting thing is I don't know that I don't think my mood swings got any worse.
It's probably because he supplemented you so much with other things. Like you probably
Yeah,
weren't low on
and
vitamin
one
C
of the
and D.
things we were still fighting with was chronic pain. The pain, I got off the opiates, the pain didn't go away.
Right.
The pain was absolutely still there. So, he put me on some high anti-inflammatory stuff. I did some high dose turmeric, I did
Mhm.
CBD. So we were really trying to hit the whole inflammation thing hard. And then he just put me on what he considers like kind of the most vital supplements to help support me that I was probably deficient in. And as I've learned more, those deficiencies were probably what were contributing to
Exactly.
the mental.
One big cycle.
Right. So the Back on Track had started things off with a probiotic, and I was still using that. I tell everyone that's my favorite product in the store. But we'd also moved me on to a little more potent probiotic at that time to really start focusing on gut health. I was doing high dose omega-3s because the studies and all of that show, especially for mental health, that 3 grams or more of omega-3s is ideal. So I was doing that. I was on his multivitamin. There's all these little caveats in there too. One thing that Jared recognized early on that I didn't know anything about until not too long ago, a few years ago, he kind of had a feeling I was MTHFR gene mutation. And for those that don't know what that is, it means that you can't methylate certain vitamins,
Hmm.
and specifically folate and B12. And
Which is super important when you're an infant.
Yes. And then, throw that on top of the antibiotics and the poor gut health. So he
Wow.
his multi covered those methylated vitamins for me. And then magnesium was a big one. And that's basically what I was doing supplementally. I do remember the one thing I told him is that he asked me one day how I was feeling. And I told him it was the clearest my brain had been I couldn't remember in years. I couldn't remember the time that my brain had been that clear.
Wow.
So I didn't realize quite what the brain fog was that I had been living in until I started to get out of it.
So you got out. Yeah. You don't even know until
Right.
you're
And I
out.
didn't realize how numbed either that I was to things until
Yes.
I had started coming back. And yeah, just there's so many things. And then also like that, yeah, my mood swings weren't and weren't that great. Like they didn't get worse. I was still about where I had been on the meds. I just actually could think a little clearer and start feeling
Interesting.
a little bit more.
Interesting.
And so yeah, those were basically the differences right off.
Right. I love hearing your story about all of this because and I think it was so important to hear even way back when you started on all of this, because it just shows like how, and I'm sure you could write a book, girl. I'm sure like we just got the tip of the iceberg of your journey.
Yeah, we haven't even talked what diet did. So yeah, that's
Yeah, like I'm sure we're just getting the tip of it all, but I love hearing it, even if we just get like snapshots of it, because it just goes to show that no matter where you're at, you can come out on top and you don't have to just always go the Western medicine route. Now, I firmly believe that there is a time and place for both. Like, obviously, but what you are told is not always end all be all. And I love this message. I love the story. And it's a story of hope. It's a story of change and possibility. And we're really lucky to have you on and tell us this, share all of this because it's vulnerable. It's always vulnerable putting your story out there and talking, no matter how many times you've done it. So for people listening who feel stuck, whether in addiction or chronic illness or hopelessness, what's the first small step you'd encourage them to take towards creating some change?
believe it can happen.
Mm.
You have to believe it can happen first. And be patient with yourself. It takes time. I mean, I met Jared 7 years ago. We're actually coming up on 8 years. It took me 2 years almost before I even considered trying some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just progressively gotten better. And and that's the thing. It's progression. It's not instant. You're not going to find one supplement or even two supplements, and there's trial and error in it. We did a lot of mindset work and just shifting my mindset on my belief systems and the stories I told myself was huge. That alone played a huge part. And then my third part of it was my diet. And I made massive shifts to my diet. If you'd told me I eat like I do now 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you. But I also am at a point where like the difference, and that's when my mood completely leveled out, was when I shifted my diet.
Yeah.
So people dismiss those things way too easily. They don't think that they play that big of a part. And I really think diet and supplementation are the two keys to fixing most of mental health issues. And the mindset comes. The funny thing is I did the mindset work. The first time I started it and did it, it didn't click. And it wasn't until I had gotten a little farther in and my mind had cleared up a little more before some of those ideas could start to take root. And so it's kind of mindset absolutely works. But I also think like there's a lot of people that get mad when I was one of those. I'm like, don't tell me I have to just think different.
Right.
My brain doesn't think different. And I still have to really make an effort to see things in different ways sometimes because my brain's very trained in one way. And I think my personality is just kind of a certain way too, but it doesn't mean that it can't change. It just takes effort and time and be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
But it can. There's so many answers out there. And my approach might be a little different than somebody else's, but that's the beauty of it. And I think the holistic approach, the whole body, not just focusing on one little aspect is the way to go.
And now you are a co-owner at Vitality Nutrition with Jared, helping people change lives every single day, every phone call, every podcast, every person that walks through the door. You guys have the opportunity to change them. Yeah. I'm sure people listening are going, okay, my interest is piqued. I can really relate to Jen's story, bits and pieces of it, all of it, like whatever. What do you suggest that they do? Should they go to the show notes? This is what I'm going to tell them to do. Go to the show notes. We'll put links in there. Can you guys help them get on the right path with the right supplements? Because I know people are listening going, okay, but, well, now what? This is great. I want to be like Jen.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first place I tell people to start, Jared's podcast, which I put in nutrition before, is Vitality Radio Podcast.
Yes, that's it.
I know my brain got all flustered and I threw nutrition in there. Vitality Radio Podcast. Well, I've done multiple episodes with him, but we've done 5 specific one's called Jen's Story. Okay. One's an overview, then it's weaning off meds, it's mindset, supplements, and diet.
Perfect.
We cover each of those in depth or in more detail. And so that's a great place to go to start, just to get
Okay.
more detail on it. You can always call the store. Our number is 801-292-6662 here at Vitality Nutrition. We have Instagram, which is Vitality Nutrition Bountiful. It's long. And then our website, if you're interested in ordering anything, we also have a chat feature on there that can
It's
send
very cool.
messages on. That's really cool. So one of those ways I'm usually
Yeah.
around or have access to.
I love it. I love it because so many times I listen to things or I hear something and I'm like, great, but what do I do? How do I start? Who do I reach out to? And I love that you have all of these different avenues for people to take. So you guys listening to this, you don't have to listen to it and be like, oh, that's nice. That's good for Jen. Well, but I don't even know where to start. I don't have anything to do. You do have a way now.
And I was very much that person of like, yeah, that's that person. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And here I am. So that's
Right.
what, I just really try to let people or help people understand that they can do it too. I'm not
Absolutely.
unique in that sense.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, is just more proof in the pudding that it doesn't matter where you came from. You can rise, you can change. The inside matters, the mental health matters. And if you put it all together, like, you can have incredible results. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be setbacks. That's
No.
a joke if you think
Yeah.
that it's just going to be smooth sailing. Like,
Well, and one last thing on the mindset thing that I learned, I used to get super frustrated with myself because I'd say, it was always the like one step forward, two steps back or whatever. And it frustrated me to no end until I shifted my view of that. And as I started to look at it as, okay, I've learned this new thing. I took the step forward. The falling back is just my opportunity now to actually put it into practice and apply it. And
Right.
it's not a fallback, it's an opportunity. And as long as you look at everything you do in those terms, it makes it so much easier. Then you're not failing, you're not falling back. You're just applying what you've learned. It's an opportunity.
Right. Well, Jen, thank you so much for coming on and again, being vulnerable, sharing your journey and your story just to help others and get the message out there. We really appreciate it. And you are truly a blessing to this show. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, check out the show notes, go to the links because the change is for you right there, right around the corner. It's a click away. All right, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy. Until next time. The Bomb Life podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content shared here is not intended as medical, legal, or professional advice. Always consult with a qualified professional before making any health, fitness, financial, or legal decisions. The opinions shared on this podcast are personal experiences and insight. So if you need expert guidance, go find the right professional for you. Thanks for listening.